Welcome to the service on behalf of Monton Unitarian Church for Sunday, the 11th of April. Our theme this week is that of vulnerable connections. I begin, as always, by lighting our chalice candle. And our opening words are by Dory J. Summers. Let us enter into the circle of energy and love. All are welcome here. We are an inclusive community of faith and kindness, memory and hope. All are welcome here. We are a community with a deep and abiding trust in the promise of goodness in every human heart and soul. All are welcome here. We are a community of quest where we gather to study and search. All are welcome here. We are a community of service where the gifts we give and receive are compassion, forgiveness, gratitude, and devotion. All are welcome here. We are a community of joy and laughter, where the worth of every individual is celebrated. All are welcome here. So let us join together in a time of prayer. This was written by Ian Riddle, and I have adapted it slightly. Come, come whoever you are. Spirit of life and love, you are that voice calling us. That voice which calls us together here today, in this place and space made holy by our presence and by the sacred breath we share in our singing and speaking and silence. That voice which calls us to remember that we are not alone and that we are inextricably linked to all other life, woven into a vast tapestry of existence, of which we are a powerful, integral, and holy part. And just as we have been called together here today, may we act as the voice, the heart, the hands of another call. The call to walk with the wanderers, sing and dance with the worshippers, proclaim the memory of those who have taken their leave. Wrap the despairing and the broken in the arms of love and community. And hold the hands of all of us who have broken our vows and call us back again and again to the covenant and work of justice, humility, and steadfast faithfulness. Spirit of life and love, be with us as we seek to do your work. Amen. My story today was written by Becky Brooks, and it's called Tiny the God. Once upon a time, there was a tiny little itty bitty very small tiny little god named Tiny. She lived her life hearing stories of all the big gods. And let's face it, she was jealous. She knew she needed to think of some kind of special spark of an idea that would make her existence meaningful. After watching humans for a long time, she hit upon something that just might work. Something to make people think, yeah, that Tiny has really got a good idea going. This was it. This was going to make her famous. You ready? Here it is. You are not alone. She took the form of a very light breeze, and in a voice so quiet that each person heard it only in their mind, she said, "You are not alone. You are not alone." People loved it. It was perfect because, well, who doesn't want to hear that? Pretty soon Tiny was comforting people all over with, "You are not alone." Every evening she took the form of the breeze and whispered it into people's minds. Until one day, she encountered someone who wasn't comforted at all. When Miriam heard Tiny's words in her mind, instead of feeling comforted, she felt, well, agitated. Something was just kind of off about it. She kept saying it to herself over and over again. "You are not alone. You are not alone." She tossed and turned and she couldn't sleep. In the morning she went to read the paper, and instead of skimming through everything, she found herself drinking in every single story. She was only halfway through when she found herself crying. "I'm not alone," she said. "I'm connected to every one of these people. They live in my town and my country and my world. They love their children like I love mine. They're scared sometimes, and so am I. They hurt like I hurt. I am not alone. I can help." Well, Tiny was surprised. It hadn't occurred to her that someone might think of it that way. So Tiny kept a watch over Miriam to monitor this interesting development. Miriam and a co-worker met online in a meeting and talked about a law they hoped the government would pass. And Tiny noticed when Miriam wrote a letter to her representative about it right away. She noticed that when Miriam went shopping, she bought a few extra things for her neighbour and left them with a colourful note on their porch. She noticed that Miriam had tears in her eyes when she joined in her congregation's worship on her computer, and she heard her favourite hymn through the small speakers. Miriam got out her phone and made an extra donation to the congregation. She watched as Miriam wrote postcards to friends and family near and far, waved to the dog walkers who passed by her house, and strung up colourful lights in her living room window. But most importantly for Tiny, she noticed when Miriam received a phone call one evening from a friend she hadn't heard from in a long while. His voice was shaking. "I'm having a hard time," he said. He started to tell her about his troubles, but he began to cry. Miriam got herself comfortable in her favourite chair. "Take your time. I'll stay on the line with you. You're not alone. I am here. I am here." Tiny heard those words like an echo in her mind. "You are not alone. I am here. You are not alone. I am here." In that moment, Tiny knew that she was nothing without Miriam's hands and heart and spirit. And she knew that what she wanted, what the world needed more than anything, was what Miriam had learned to give. So Tiny went to work. Instead of just spending her evenings spreading the gospel of "you are not alone," She spent her night times doing it too, and her mornings and afternoons. Pretty soon she was spending every moment doing it, until she became the breeze itself. That's why there are no paintings of Tiny, no sculptures or holy books, just a breeze, a low voice, and many, many helping hands, loving hearts, and caring spirits. You can hear the echo if you listen closely. You are not alone. I am here. When water bottles are left in the desert for those who risk their lives to cross it, you are not alone. I am here. At the bedside of a dying man, you are not alone. I am here. In the prison and the sanctuary, you are not alone. I am here. Separate and together, you are not alone. I am here. So let us join together again in a time of prayer. And this was written by Tanya Cothran. Spirit of life and love, teach us to consider how others experience the world, to understand how my reality and their reality are different, and yet they share qualities of the same core desire. Teach us to listen for shared feelings, for places of connection. Teach us to be curious and open to hearing differences. Teach us to love into brokenness, to give space for, to be patient with healing. Let us be strong in our vulnerability, in our not knowing, in exposing our less than perfect scary bits to those in front of us. Give us courage to face judgment, scorn and hatred because of the greater good. Let us be disciples of essential goodness, strong in our knowing that in each being there is a divine light of the soul. Give us the strength to keep feeling empathy, even when we are tired and broken. For it is then that you are feeling the empathy through us. Amen. My next reading is by Nikki Gerard. It's called Cherishing the Ties That Bind Us. Humans need connection. We are social animals and exist in a network of reciprocal relationships. Solitary confinement is a form of torture that can swiftly drive people mad. Locked into the cell of the self, the world does not reach them, and they cannot reach out to the world. Words need to be heard, pain recognized, joy shared. Loneliness is hazardous. These past extraordinary months have shown how much we yearn for connection, and also how ingenious, funny, heartbreakingly generous and kind people can be in maintaining it, in spite of imposed isolation. More than all the new forms of creativity going on everywhere, we have heard over and over how people are talking to each other now. talking as never before, revealing themselves. It is as if a skin had been peeled away. Sometimes, painfully, we have come face to face with our own vulnerability and preciousness. A boy dies in hospital without his family and is buried without them. Relatives look through windows at their loved ones in residential homes. People say farewell to the gravely ill by Skype. We can no longer pretend to ourselves we are self-sufficient, autonomous, invincible, in control. More helpless, more exposed, more reliant on the generosity of others and aware of our own mortality, we can speak things we previously kept hidden. We can ask ourselves what really matters in this world of ours that we all hold in common. A mighty collective experience draws everyone together. And the brief, crisis-driven experience of isolation may have given us more empathetic understanding of what it is to be truly alone and on the margins of society. These days will come to an end. We will be able to travel the country, swim in the sea, sit in each other's rooms, lean over tables in restaurants and bars, dance, hug each other at last, with bodies that are no longer contagious. But we mustn't go back to the world that we were living in before, or unlearn the hard-won lessons of collaboration, kindness, empathy, and human vulnerability. We mustn't stop seeing and valuing the delivery driver, the hospital cleaner, the residential worker, the woman at the checkout, the neighbour over the fence, the stranger on the other side of the road, the person in need, the old and the frail and the forgotten, those hidden in life's shadows. We can do it better. No going back. Those were words by Nikki Gerard. And a poem by Gordon B. McKeeman, entitled Contact. I stretch forth my hand, knowing not what I shall touch. A tender spot, an open wound, warmth, pulsing life, fragile blossoms, a rock, ice. I am tentative, trembling, wishing to avoid hurt, wanting to link my life with life. Lonely, I desire companions. Naked, I long for defenders. Lost, I want to find and be found. Will I touch strangers or enemies or nothing? My hand is withdrawn, but still it touches. My vulnerable skin, my furrowed brow, my empty pocket, my full heart. Do others reach, tremble, withdraw? Do they desire, long, seek? Are they lonely, fearful, lost? Will they grasp a tentative, trembling hand? I stretch forth my hand, knowing not what I shall touch, but hoping. Margaret Thatcher declared the end of society. I think it's fair to say that she was wrong, but the question of what our society actually looks like, and what it could and should look like, still stands. We can communicate with so many people in so many places in so many different ways, but there is a large difference between communication and connection. Gary Kowalski, one of my favourite Unitarian Universalist authors, had a number of things to say about connection in a reflection he entitled Degrees of Separation. For example, he said, "Is the world getting more connected or more fragmented?" Facebook, in conjunction with the University of Milan, recently announced that there were only 4.74 degrees of separation among its 700 million users, representing 10% of the world's population. That contrasts with the famous 6 degrees that Yale researcher Stanley Milgram found back in the 1960s. Social media, we're to believe, are bringing people closer together. Kowalski argued, however, that despite that, people seem to be becoming more isolated, even as the world became more wired. That's something we've certainly had to get our heads around this past year, with online or over the phone being pretty much it in terms of communication for so many of us. Even letter writing was hazardous, with so many postal workers not being able to work, and letter delivery being an extremely ad hoc event. People's attitudes towards online communities vary for all sorts of reasons. While some people are very uncomfortable with it, and many others do not have the technology, others have fallen quite happily into the practice of Zooming here and there several times a day, and get a lot of value out of it, experiencing both education, community, and meaningful worship. It's different, granted, but done well, it can still be extremely good. Of course, you could argue the same about in-person education, community, and worship. They can be done both well and badly too. And I know that many people who use Facebook and Instagram and other types of media do build strong, supportive communities that can look after each other extremely well. But I don't think that anybody would deny that no matter how good online communities may be, there is something special about the physical presence of other people. As Gary Kowalski went on to say, it appears that we need an actual human presence, the shelter of each other, to feel whole. There's no digital substitute for a hug, a handshake, or a smile. This is one role that religious institutions play in our culture, as well as civic organisations and bowling leagues. Of course, merely attending a church, mosque, or synagogue doesn't automatically mean you feel known and accepted. You still have to do the work of building caring bonds. But at least meaningful relationships are possible in congregations and special affinity groups in a way that cyberspace just won't allow. But perhaps you didn't need a university study or a mathematical analysis to tell you what the world's religions have affirmed for centuries. The best way to bring our world closer together, to lower the degree of separation and strife is the old-fashioned way, through charity and compassion, by practicing patience and tolerance and goodwill, turning strangers into friends and enemies into conversation partners, one by one by one. There's a difference, however, between surface connections that are made between people all the time, that break whenever the immediate interaction is over, and deeper connections. Deeper connections are risky, take a lot of working up to, and need strong foundations. Because for deeper connection, each party needs to be willing to be vulnerable. But it's something that we are becoming braver about. The Me Too campaign inspired women, and indeed men, to speak up finally about the abuse they had suffered, when it became clear that at long last they would be listened to with compassion and a longing for justice. Black Lives Matter acted as an amplifier to help black people's voices be heard after being silenced and ignored for too long. Both needed people willing to speak out about very personal and painful experiences, to be vulnerable, to make themselves even more open to hurt than they already were. Both resulted in deep connections being made, as people found common ground, shared common experiences, and offered solidarity. And then came the pandemic, and a social experience that none of us were prepared for, that threatened to take away all those connections. Communication was suddenly stopped as families couldn't visit each other, either in their own homes or in hospitals or even on their deathbeds, and friends couldn't attend funerals. In its place came a virtual outpouring of compassion, of reaching out, of vulnerable connection. I saw Facebook post after Facebook post of people sharing how they were hurting, and of others truly hearing them and acknowledging their pain and reassuring them that they were going to be okay, that they weren't alone, that thousands of others were walking with them through this strange land we found ourselves in. Groups were set up across the country. We Love Knutsford, where I live, Spirit of Salford here, and others too many to name, with but one aim: to make connections with those people who were feeling isolated, not just to offer the practical help of shopping or pharmacy trips, but a whole network of listening ears and virtual shoulders, and the absolute conviction that it was important to talk about what we were going through, to share how much we were struggling, so that others could reassure us, and we could reassure others that we were not alone. As Nikki Gerard said in our reading, we can no longer pretend to ourselves that we are self-sufficient, autonomous, invincible, and in control. More helpless, more exposed, more reliant on the generosity of others, and aware of our own mortality. We can speak things we previously kept hidden, We can ask ourselves what really matters in this world of ours that we all hold in common. But she equally pointed out that the lessons we learn must go far beyond the pandemic itself. A mighty collective experience draws everyone together, and the brief crisis-driven experience of isolation may have given us more empathetic understanding of what it is to be truly alone and on the margins of society. Vulnerable connection is not just a human necessity, not even a matter of social justice, as important as that is. Being willing and ready to be vulnerable ourselves, and willing and ready to bear witness to and sit with others' vulnerability, and to make soul-deep connections through that vulnerability, is an act of worship. Through our vulnerable connections, we continue doing Tiny the God's work. Tiny went to work. Instead of just spending her evenings spreading the gospel of "You are not alone," she spent her night times doing it too, and her mornings and afternoons. Pretty soon she was spending every moment doing it, until she became the breeze itself. And that is why there are no paintings of Tiny, no sculptures or holy books, just a breeze, a low voice, and many, many helping hands, loving hearts, and caring spirits. You are not alone. And our final blessing, as written by Cynthia Landrum. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other. Our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues until we are together again, friends. Be strong, be well, be true, be loving. Amen. Thank you so much again for joining me this week. And I look forward to seeing you again next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay strong, stay safe, and know that you are loved and you are not alone.